Who saw this? Raise your hands if you saw the keynote this morning. Okay, great. So, did you see the shirt that I was wearing? Yeah. Okay. So, this is a funny story. Yesterday, before the keynote, we're doing some dry runs, we're running through the demo. and I'm about to go home, or to the hotel, and someone just offhand says, hey, and by the way, demoers, don't wear striped shirts, because it messes with the HD cameras, etc. And I was like, whoa, hang on, I only have striped shirts. Now, I happen to be in the shirt you saw me in this morning yesterday. And that was also the shirt that I worked out in that morning. So they go, just wear that shirt. I was like, this thing smells now. I'm going to wear it tomorrow? All right, just stay away from me. Bob's going to be a little irritated with me. So that was pretty funny. Well, I hope you like that. That was that was also another interesting keynote, because it was one of these things where it's always amazing how all the work that goes into those things. It's unbelievable how many people and how much energy goes into those keynotes. And yet at the same time, it's also amazing how much comes together at the last minute. So for me, I got involved in that Thursday night of last week. So, you know, I'm kind of sitting there at my computer, and someone comes up or sends me an email and says, hey, Cam, you know, what are you doing Tuesday morning next week? Well, nothing. Great, you can help with the keynote demo. And then, you know, lit the next 4 days on fire getting ready for that demo. So anyway, it was an exciting event. Any questions before we start? Nothing? Go ahead.
Has the upgrade of Visual Studio with WPF led to any interesting stories you want to share?
Question is, has the upgrade to incorporating the WPF into the Visual Studio shell, has that caused us any issues? It's been just seamless, no problems, it's just worked. We've run through our share of issues, and there's no doubt. Dog fooding, the interesting thing about building Visual Studio, with Visual Studio is as it's churning, that's a difficult problem, But, for the most part, it's given us a number of different things that we can do now, of course. It's interesting, though, in Visual Studio 2010, we haven't even actually started to take advantage of a lot of the things that we've now spent so much time and energy on building that infrastructure. And you're actually going to see that, in the next release. The new editor, for instance. We spent, it was a much bigger task to get that thing in there. And we unfortunately weren't able to really build much on top of that new infrastructure. So you can look forward to some new interesting things on that once we get a little farther down the road. Go ahead.
What's the next release after VS 2010?
Next release after VS 2010? I have no idea. At this point, we're just trying to finish 2010. But we are starting, we are trying to get aggressive in terms of the cadence of what we're trying to get those releases out, but I can only speculate at this point.
Are you feature locked on 2010 yet?
Feature locked on 2010? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. How many people have taken Beta 2 out for a test drive? Excellent. Please do so, and keep getting us the feedback on any issues you run into, because there are some for sure. And the more feedback we get from you guys, the more we can, and the earlier we get it, the better chance we have of getting that in the product. Go ahead.
Do you have another milestone before the RC?
Yeah, so like a release candidate, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know what our plans are in terms of making that public or not. I'm not sure. But you'll definitely hear it. If we decide to do that. Anybody? I'm not totally sure on that. Any other questions before the actual talk starts?
Did you say that you use Visual Studio to build Visual Studio?
Sure.
What version do you use to build the latest?
The current.
Oh, really?
So the question is, you said you use Visual Studio to build Visual Studio. And he asked, which version? And I said, the current version. That's why it's so painful. Yeah. It's called dog fooding, and sometimes the dog food tastes really bad. But as you move forward, it starts tasting better and better and better. But it's really one of these things that we really want to use the product to make the product better. It's amazing how when a dev who's working on that product runs into an issue, how fast that issue gets corrected. It's funny how that works. Not to say that customer feedback isn't listened to or anything, but it is amazing when you have that problem and you just get in there and fix it. Okay, I think we should start this thing. I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Cameron Skinner. I am the product unit manager on the Visual Studio team. I'm actually responsible for the architecture pieces. This was easier before we changed the whole SKU lineup to talk about exactly what I do, but everything under the architecture menu in Visual Studio, my team owns. So a lot of all the features that I'm going to show you here today, my team built and is delivering inside Visual Studio 2010. Before we were working on the architecture products, I came to Microsoft in 2005 to build the Database Professionals product, Data Dude. That was my first gig at Microsoft, actually. So, how many people have used DB Pro or Data Dude? How many people are just raving fans, love that? Yeah, keep that up, keep the hands up. Good. Okay. All right, what are we talking about today? By the end of this talk, you will understand the following about Arc and visualization tools, why we built it, who we built it for, and what it can do. And if you've ever come to one of my presentations, I try to stay out of slides as much as possible and try to stay demoing the product as much as possible. So I'm going to spend a whole lot of time on what it can do and a whole lot of less time on the why and the who, but you'll actually get some of the whys as I go through the demos. Oh, and before I forget, this year is different at PDC in terms of session evaluations. So if you do a session evaluation, actually for every one done is $1. Microsoft PDC will donate $1 to the Boys and Girls Foundation. And for every 5 that an individual does, we get $2. So I just wanted to mention that for session evals at the end of this. If you like it, if you don't like it, just at least get that thing done. I just want to put that out there. Okay. Why did we build the tools that I'm about to show you? And it's ultimately all about complexity. Software is only getting more complicated in regards to how we build it, who's building it, organizational issues around building it, and the list goes on and on. As we continue to create more and more technology, we need to integrate that technology in some way. And that becomes complicated. So it's interesting. We've got these tools that allow us to do a whole lot more quicker, and yet we keep building on top of that infrastructure and keep building on top of that infrastructure. So the need to understand your problem domain, the need to understand your existing software, just keeps building on itself. So we need to start creating some more tools, some more capabilities to help start attacking this thing that is complexity in software development. So we're doing this by a few ways. We're doing this by increasing the shared understanding between teammates. I'm going to talk about what that is. Understanding an existing system. How many people actually get the chance to do file new project in Visual Studio? Oh, more hands than I thought, actually. Good for you. Are those just prototype, or is that actual work? Demoware? Okay. All right, that doesn't count. So how many people are actually doing brand new development at work? Your day job, brand new development. Oh, that's good. You're lucky. That's actually a much more a bit larger show of hands than I've seen in a long time. Most people have to spend a lot of time maintaining an existing code base. So you may have heard the terms brownfield versus greenfield, et cetera. And we have a tendency here at Microsoft to want to talk about the greenfield apps, file new project. And it turns out a lot of people don't get that experience too much. You have to build on existing applications and understand what that looks like. So we need some tools to help you understand that existing system. And then, once you understand it, you need to be able to control it, maintain that understanding, beyond just your tribal knowledge of that code at this point, right? So once you get an understanding of what that base is, the dependencies around it, how do you, build in some safety measures to keep it understood? And I'm going to show you a few pieces of capability that is coming in 2010 that can help you with this. So, some folks ask me, so are you building this tooling for just architects? Because if you haven't heard, we've actually put some UML designers in the product. And if you also haven't heard, UML and Microsoft in the past, it was a little, I don't know what you want to call that, but wasn't, we weren't doing this thing. Now we are, we're doing this thing. And the UML plus DSL thing is something that we absolutely very much believe in. The right tool for the right job is really it. But the thing is, when people see us putting UML in the tool, they think, oh, you're just doing this for the architects. And that's true. We clearly want to do this for the architects. But there's actually a lot that we're doing for the developer as well. And so we're putting UML, we're putting DGML, Architecture Explorer, and layer diagrams in the product. And those are things that we really hope that the developers themselves also find useful in their day-to-day job. Okay, so devs and arcs is who we're shooting this thing at. Okay? Okay, so what is it? In Visual Studio 2010, in the Ultimate product, everyone, are you familiar with the new skewing lineup in Visual Studio? Okay, so let me just give you a quick rundown of what that looks like. So at the top of the stack, you've got Visual Studio Ultimate. Right in the middle, you got Visual Studio Premium. And right at the bottom is Visual Studio Professional. And they build on each other in like a Russian doll kind of way. Does that make sense? So everything in Visual Studio Pro is in Premium. Everything in Premium is in Ultimate. So you get Ultimate if you want all the bits. Everything I'm going to show you here is in Ultimate. Okay? Okay. So to understand the code, I've got this, this high-level scenario of understand the code. We've got some specific features, some specific capabilities that we built into the tool around that exact theme. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that today. So if you've come to really, dig real deep into our UML capabilities, I'm only going to touch on it briefly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I will show it, though. I will do a little bit about it and show you what's there. But I'm going to spend most of my time here on understanding the code and showing you the tooling that we have there. Then you've got the maintain control. So around this is the layer diagram and custom MS build task work item integration with the rest of Team Foundation Server. And then understand the domain, UML diagrams, modeling project. And then I'm going to show you, hopefully, if I've got the time here, show you some rich extensibility that we've built into the tool as well. Any questions at this point? Okay, so one other thing I'd like to mention in terms of just setting the ground rules here is please interrupt me at any time. Ask the questions. I will attempt to feed those back to you. If you want to go to a mic and do that, that's great too. But anytime, I love to keep this interactive. It's not that big. We should be able to keep this fairly interactive. Okay, so with that, let me drop into Visual Studio. Okay, let me try to make some room here. Okay, the first thing I want to show you, actually, I want to show you a trick first off. Has anyone seen this? You go into Tools, Options, Documents, Show Miscellaneous Files in Solution Explorer. Anyone seen what this does for you? No one. Okay. Then, sir, I'm teaching you something right now. You asked me you wanted to learn something? This is it. Okay, what that does for you is now when I open up a file, such as I'm going to reach up here to Architecture, Generate Dependency by Assembly, What this is going to do, this diagram here that I'm going to build is it's not associated with any solution. So it's a temporary file. I haven't saved it. I haven't put it into a solution. Well, Visual Studio actually tracks that. And because I've turned on the Show Miscellaneous Files, you'll actually see it in your Solution Explorer right here, which is actually quite useful because then when you do save this, I can then easily drag it into my solution and without having to deal with my file system. Little trick. OK, so what did I just do? So I reached up here, architecture. Remember I said everything under this menu my team owns. I created a dependency diagram, OK, by assembly. Now what this did is it went, let me start freeing some real estate up. What this did is it went into my solution, it built the solution, and then it cracked every assembly in that solution and built a graph that shows you the dependencies between all those assemblies. Okay? Now you'll notice how some lines are thicker than others. That's kind of showing you how deep the dependency goes. So if you've got a real thick line, you've got a lot of dependencies between those assemblies, and a thin line, you've only got a couple. That in itself can give you some indication in regards to if you see that dependency and you're like, oh, why is that there? You have if it's a real thin one, maybe you have a chance of refactoring that out and breaking that dependency. Does that make sense? OK, a couple things to note here. I can right-click, marquee select, and that'll zoom in. If I hold the Control key and scroll, I can scroll in and pan around. Can everyone see that OK in the back? OK, great. Now I can scroll back out and scroll around. Now, what I want to show you here, was there a question? OK. Notice here, let me make this big for the folks in the back. I've got this externals box. All right. What this is we've basically clumped into one group everything that your solution is dealing with that is outside the solution. So all system calls, if you've got dependencies on third-party product, what have you, we call that out in here. So if I expand this now, if I open this thing up and zoom out a little bit, you'll notice in here actual DLLs. So these are all DLLs still that we've grouped for you. So in this particular case, this application that I have open in the Solution Explorer is a web application. It's a pet shop application. This is the thing, we've been kicking this thing around forever at Microsoft. And what this is showing you is it's not showing you everything in the system namespace and down. It's just showing you what you're dependent on. So as I start to select around, if I select, like, say, system.web application services, boy, that's kind of hard to see. There's a blue line here that shows up. And if I go and I go click on the navigator here, you notice how I can select that navigator and click? I can jump to the other side of that, and that shows me what class in your code is actually using that assembly, right? So the idea behind this is to get an understanding. We firmly believe that in order to understand your application, you kind of have to understand what it's built on, right? What the foundation is. And so that externals concept is important. We wanted to show you, hey, you've got a number of dependencies on the framework, and here's exactly where. And that could be, really important when you're trying to understand, hey, where's my database access layer? What's that doing? I'm trying to go from WinForms to WPF. I want to understand where those assemblies are being referenced, that kind of thing. And that becomes really important. Whoa. OK. OK. So now let me drill into this just a bit more. If I want to go, let me come over here. Zoom in a bit. Let's see. The other thing that you can do is, if I wanted to, I'm looking for my web. I can come up here and say, not that. I'm going to bring up the find And I basically want to, let me bring that up so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to type in web here. I basically want to find my web DLL. Okay, so there's petshopweb.dll. If I want to understand, if I hover over one of these links, you'll see that the source node is petshopweb.dll. The target node is petshop.bll.dll. And it's a calls, and it's also references, and there's also return relationships. So what this is basically doing is it's telling me the kind of the nature of the dependencies. So in this case, hey, you're making calls directly from this assembly to this other. You're also just making references to various types between these two assemblies. And you're actually also doing returns back and forth. So bottom line, what that tells me is these DLLs are highly coupled because they're passing data back and forth is ultimately what that means. Okay? Question?
Are these just static compile time dependencies, or do I also see dynamic things like events?
Great question. So the question was, is this just static dependencies, or do I see dynamic dependencies? So like if we dynamically load an assembly. Great question.
Or just an event.
Or an event. We will pick up events, but the thing is, we won't pick up, let's say if you're doing dynamic loads. It is a static pass. Okay? So that is something to know. That's something that we're talking about the next version of the product. Something we should keep in mind. It's the dynamics aspects. Understanding if you're doing dependency injection, you're using MEF, you're using whatever Unity. I see Grigori over there. We're not picking that up, and I just want to call that out. Is that is an issue, right? You should be aware of that as you're looking at this. This is pure static. Great question. Any other questions about that?
What is external? Only to find out where it is English, or if I have my own custom assembly?
Yeah, so the question was, what does externals really mean? And it is literally anything that's outside your solution, which includes, a lot of people break their solutions down, or their main projects down into many solutions potentially, and even those, even though that's your code, if it's not in that particular solution, it's going to see it as an external call.
Is this totally read-only view, or can I use it for some refactoring or adding DLL?
Question, is this a read-only view, or can you actually go and affect code with this, refactor from here? And from that, in that context, no, it is read-only. If I go change this, I'm not going to affect code. Okay? So this is it's a snapshot of your code. And in many ways, remember I was talking about, I showed you the miscellaneous documents. In many ways, this is designed to be a temporal diagram. You just want to get your head around this thing, understand, start to zoom in on the app, and start to understand your dependency and start to get those dependencies under control. That's what it's really designed to do. Now, you can save this, and I can show you some capabilities of how to call out certain areas of this diagram. You can recolorize and do things like that, but it's not designed to go and refactor your code from here. Okay? Okay, so now, one more question, and I got to move forward.
Can I open this diagram and compare with another, like WinDiff or something, to see the differences between, I don't know, before refactoring and after refactoring? Okay,
great question. And I'll reparse that question to say, hey, do you support visual diffing? Is that right?
Yeah.
No. We got to get there, but we don't have it yet. Now, the back end of this diagram is XML, and that's always a good time to do an XML diff, but we don't have a visual diff yet. That's something we're definitely going to work on.
Can you right-click objects and create a work item?
Hold that thought. On this particular graph, no, you can't on this graph. But I will show you some other diagrams that do allow this. This is a DSL, by the way, back to the whole domains, but this is a DSL that is very simple. If you look at the XML behind this, which is called DGML, Directed Graph Markup Language, it is simply nodes and links. Literally, at the heart of this diagram, it's nodes and links. It actually, now that it's done generating from your assemblies, it actually doesn't know anything about your code, which is why we can't take it to go and refactor from it. It just knows nodes and links, and we've got a number of attributes on those nodes and links to allow us to render it in a certain way, like with containers, et cetera. Okay? That's an interesting thing, by the way, because we're going to build on the simplicity of this model in future releases. To give you an idea, just to whet your appetite a little bit, we will do visualization of, say, TFS work items, for instance. What are the relationships with those work items? You should be able to see a graph like this. What are the relationships between my code and my organizational hierarchy? See a graph like this. So the idea behind this is be able to visualize any kind of data source that you can then go and manipulate in some way and communicate with the rest of your with the rest of your organization in some way. But we wanted to give you rich capabilities out of the box to go and understand your code base. Okay? So dependency management, a lot of what we need to do to manage complexity of your software system is make sure that the diagrams themselves aren't too complex. And so if you wanted to drill into the exact, you wanted to understand exactly why this dependency is here, you can filter this graph further by doing this. So you'll notice, can everyone see the navigator that pops up here in the back? This navigator has two arrows on the side of it and then a plus sign in the middle. The plus sign in the middle allows me, I'll click on that. And what this is basically saying is, it gives me the mechanism to say, let me look at why this dependency is there. I want to understand why is this line that thick? And give me the ability to go look into exactly why that is. Okay? So I'm going to filter my graph by creating another one. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that plus sign. And then I get basically a generate dependency graph dialog. And what this is basically a way to customize the information coming back. So in this case, maybe I want assemblies, maybe I don't. I'm going to ask for namespaces and types and methods. I'll take it all the way down to the method level. And I could further filter this by access. So I only want publics, maybe internals, etc. Right? If I didn't want I didn't want to see the private methods, etc. I don't want to see that. But in this case, I'm going to just take the defaults there and say OK. Now, this is going to create another graph, and it's going to filter out everything. So again, remember, I was looking at Pet Shop Web DLL and Pet Shop BLL DLL. And I want to understand just the dependencies between those two. So at the high level here, that's all I see. So these blue boxes here represent the actual DLL. So now I'm going to start to expand and start to drill in. Okay? And now what you see inside here is actual namespace. Okay? So this represents an internal namespace. And you'll notice the number here. Let me zoom in a little bit to make sure you can see this. See how this number says 13 in the Pet Shop Web DLL? If I go back to the original diagram and I expand petshopweb.dll here, and I'll zoom in here, notice it says 24. What that's telling you is that there's 24 items, types, inside that namespace. If I go back to this other diagram here, it's saying that there's 13. The reason why there's 13 is we've filtered out anything that doesn't have a dependency on the BLL DLL. So the only classes and types that are inside this namespace now are classes and types that actually have a dependency on that other DLL. Does that make sense? Okay. So now as I start to drill in, I now see those types. And I can actually click on these types, and you'll see links that I can then navigate, which take me right down to the method. So this particular class, you'll see how it breaks down here, right? You've got the DLL on the outside, which contains a namespace, which contains a class, which contains methods. And so by selecting these methods, I can see dependency information. And I can navigate around from those methods. So I can just bounce on the other side. Oh, that takes me to that method, and vice versa. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. So then at this point, if I want to jump down here and go into remove, if I double click on this, it takes me to that code. So I can jump to code from this diagram, and then just do the navigate back. So the control minus key takes me back, that kind of thing. Any questions? Go ahead.
If you
Yes. So this diagram is a snapshot. Just a snapshot of your code. So yeah, if you regenerate, then you have to, if you do something else with your code, yeah, you regenerate.
How easy is it to regenerate? Is it just a refresh button, or do you have to redo it through this whole?
No, you just all you do is just go up here, buy assembly again.
But you filtered here.
Yes. So you would have to, yes, we don't have a refresh button. So you would have to go do that. Thanks for pointing that out, ET. This is a good group. We're never done, see? Go ahead. The question is, how much of this works on unmanaged C++? And the answer is none of it. So this is a good group. Here's the thing. This is, I cannot get through one presentation without that question, and it's a good one. We are actively working on that problem, and we are working hard to drop an out-of-band release, what we call an OOB, that plugs into this, that enables that. But I don't have a date for you yet. We're working on it as we speak, because to be honest with you, it's embarrassing, right? I mean, this is one of those things that, you know, as the product ran on, we had to make some painful cuts, and that was one of the most painful. And I had to make that cut, and believe me, I didn't want to do it. Any other questions?
Out of curiosity, is this, what artifacts are you using to generate this? Are you using the binaries, or are you actually using like the object model?
We're using the binaries, and we are using, we understand where the code is. We're using, I can't remember the name, but it's a new API in 2010 that we're using to grovel over that. But it's both binary and source.
Is it possible to interact with this graph and define the DLs that you want in your architecture?
Yes. So the question is, can you interact with this graph and create new GHML? And the answer is that yes, to a limited degree. I can group these items, so I can select many and group, and I can show you some of that. But it's not the same as like UML modeling or anything like that, and I can show you that. Yeah. Yeah, and I can show you some of that. Go ahead.
Can't you save your filter configuration as a query or something like that?
Can you save your filter as a query? You're thinking of the Architecture Explorer, and you can do it there, but no, not here. It's not saving that. Go ahead.
Beyond the graphic realization of this, are you generating any metrics like afferent and efferent coupling, things that I can?
Yeah. So the answer is, so are we generating any other metrics while we do this? The answer is no. However, if you right-click on the solution itself, and this has actually been in the product since 2008, you can get complexity metrics by right-clicking on the solution here and say calculate code metrics. Not today. But this is another one of those interesting things where, because of the simplicity, again, of DGML, we want to overlay some more information on these graphs. That's exactly where we're heading.
Just one last question. Further to the question about C++, if the .NET code reference some components, will it show up inside here?
So if the .NET code, the question is, if the .NET code is referring to a native component, will it show up here? No. So no, because we can't crack those native binaries. Okay, let me keep moving forward just a little bit. I'm never going to get through this thing. Okay. All right. Let me just there's a number of other capabilities in the product to help you minimize the complexity on this graph potentially. So you can get into let's for instance, if I went into Pet Shop Web, let's just keep drilling in, and I wanted to just look at credit card form, let's say, and I just want to view what this thing is. I just really want to focus on this. We've got this neighborhood view, browse mode, so I only want to see what's one link away from credit card form. And so in this case, we're filtering the as-is diagram. So I'm not creating a new one. We're actually just filtering the data right in place. And that's interesting because then if I double click, I can bring in and make another type the center of the graph. And so then you start to see more of the types. You kind of put that at the center of the neighborhood. So you're only seeing things that are one away from that. Now, this is an interesting one because you see here, I've got wish list and I've got a link between those, and it's not really associated with this interface class here. If that can be in itself, that can be complicated. You could have a whole lot of classes that are within one link away, and those could be in highly interrelated relationships. So you want to cut that down. We have this thing called butterfly mode, which basically just reduces the graph to links going into your selected class. So if I do this, watch this link disappears. So now it is just focusing on the types that are directly linked to the center object. Does that make sense? The idea here is just help you get your head around, just the area of your code that you need to, and get all the other noise out of the way so you can kind of figure out, your problem at hand. Okay? Okay. So this is all well and good. You'll notice that I have an entire solution loaded, and I've done the create dependency based on the entire dependency graph or the assembly graph. Now, you can go generate dependency and say custom, which gives you a graph very similar to the one when we were drilling into that link, and that allows you to control how much detail is coming in. So if you remember, so this graph that I created, that brought in a lot of data, all the way down to the method level. Okay? You can control that access and say, no, you know what, don't go down to the method level, just bring in types, and I just want to understand the relationships between the types. This is important because as your code base, grows, I'm sure most of your code base is a little bit bigger than Pet Shop, it'll be important to control kind of how much data is coming into the tool, because you can point us at a large code base and we will chew up all the memory you got on your box. So that's something to just be aware of, to the point where sometimes you need to control, what assemblies that you really want to focus in on. And you can do that in a number of different ways. You can do it this way, where you can say, I want to look at all the assemblies in my solution, but just filter out, I don't want to see all the protected, private, etc. Or you can do it another way, and that's by using the Architecture Explorer. Can everyone see the Architecture Explorer in the back? I'm going to make it big here. Okay, so what this thing is a cascading browser that allows you to go into your code base and ask some questions. Okay? And what I'm going to do here is I want to see the dependencies between my projects. How many people know that you can see dependencies in your projects in Visual Studio? Right? You can right-click and say, hey, show me dependent by. It's a tree, it's like checkboxes and some gray boxes, etc. Well, let me show you a way of visualizing that relationship. So I can come into Visual Studio here, and I can select Solution View. Now, this class view, if I select that, is showing me all my namespaces. Okay? If I select Solution View, it's actually showing my projects in this solution. So you can kind of think of this as I want to see a logical view versus my physical. But you'll see quickly that we can go from logical to physical pretty quickly. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Solution View, and I'm going to select all by doing a Control-A here. And then I'm going to do a little trick, which is I want to say All Inbound. So understanding the cascading, the actions that you can do in the cascading browser. If you remember, I said DGML is all about nodes and links. You've got a node. You've got incoming links. You've got outgoing links. Okay? You'll notice in this browser, in this action browser, you've got inbound navigation, outbound navigation. So really at the heart of this thing, it only knows nodes and links. Now we've created node navigation that's specific to groveling over solution. But if you keep in mind that this is a simple nodes and links, it'll take you a long way down the road here. So I've got inbound links on these projects, and an inbound link would be the solution itself. So there's my solution, the Pet Shop solution. And by default, you'll notice it says contained. So by default, the action that I'm going to run here is a contained. I want to know, what does Pet Shop, the solution, contain? Well, actually, I want to ask a more specific question. I want to say, I want to understand what projects are in this solution. And so I can say, all right, select projects. Now, this will give me my projects. Now, in this case, I might have, in the first case, gotten all the listed projects. But if your solution has things like, solution folders, and you've got your projects under those solution folders, et cetera, you may not see all your projects in the first column. So this is a way to get at all of them, for sure. Okay? But now what I want to do is, I want to select all those projects. And now what I want to understand is, I want to understand what all those projects reference. So I'm going to say references. And in this case, I've got a mixture of DLLs, projects, and it should be just DLLs and projects. Yeah, so so now this is showing all these projects reference these assemblies and these other projects. I want to filter that. I only want to see what these projects reference other projects. And so there's a filter button here. You'll notice that tooltip pops up, says filter items in the current column by category and property. So I'm going to filter, not that one. I'm going to filter this by project. Okay? You see a filter icon shows up here, and now I only see projects. Now if I select all, and I click this button here to create a graph, now what you see is a visualization of your dependencies between your projects. Okay? So that's a way to visualize the dependencies just between the projects that are in this solution. Okay, that's interesting. That could be quite interesting if that's really all you're interested in. But I'm going to actually show now, I want to take these projects, and I do want to understand kind of the output of what those projects are doing. So I'm going to select these projects, and I'm going to say, let's see, assemblies. And I want to understand what assemblies are being generated from these projects. And I'm going to filter this further. On the top of the column, I can type in something here to filter the actual values here. So I'm just interested in anything that says Pet Shop in it. And that limits this down to just Pet Shop DLLs. So I'm going to select all, and now I'm going to drag out and just drop on the graph. So now what I'm seeing here, so I'll minimize this guy. Now what I'm seeing is I'm seeing all the dependencies between my projects, and then what assemblies those particular projects generate. Okay? Now, let's say the whole idea, I'm trying to get to the punchline. I hope I'm not losing you. What I'm trying to show you here is, how do you get a standard graph, very much like that assembly graph, but on a subset of your solution? And I'm almost there. What you can do here is, let's say I wanted to understand Pet Shop DB utility, and I want to create a standard graph on this, but I actually want to understand what this thing is referencing. If I just double click on this thing, it will create an assembly. It'll create that assembly diagram of just that particular assembly. Now, if I wanted to understand an assembly graph of its dependencies, I could just add more to it. Okay? Now, the other thing that I can do is, let me open up my hard drive. And let's go figure out where I put this stuff. Let's say BLL. I'm trying to find an actual DLL. All right, so here's something. So I can drag an assembly onto the graph, and that will pull in the types and the namespaces of that graph. So you can start to pull things in as needed. A lot of people are, they have a bin directory or a drop of your all up build. It goes into a bin directory, a drop folder. Boom, you can start to bring things in. Go ahead.
Do you need the code to do that?
Nope, that was pure. That was breaking just the assembly.
So I can point at any DLL as long as it's in the folder.
Yep. So the question is, do I need the code for that? And the answer is no. And so you can pull in any assembly and drop it in there. Yes, as long as it's managed. Yeah. Question?
What happens when the managed code bumps up against the reference to an unmanaged assembly?
Yeah, so the question is, what happens when the managed code bumps up against something that's unmanaged? And the answer is you won't see it. So because we can't crack that code, we won't bring it in. The question is, does the Arc Explorer work on code that doesn't build? And the answer is, to some degree, it does need it to build to get all the rich information. So the dependency information is looking at parameters, types that are being passed around, et cetera. So if we can't compile it, we can't get that information.
What does it take from the source code? The binary can draw the graph. What is the value of source code?
If the binary can draw the graph, what is the value of source code? Well, you may want to be able to get back into the source from the diagram. So on this side of that's not my computer. On this side of the graph here, I can double click and go right to source. But if I'm looking at just assemblies, I don't have the source, So maybe I wanted to get into the source and really understand it. Okay. One more question. I'm no way going to finish this doc. Okay. Let me show you. I'm going to turn off this thing. So just to take that question to conclusion, I'm going to show all here back on this graph. And I'm going to show, let's see, what do I want to show? I'm going to go into petshop.bll. I'm going to drill in here a little bit. I'm going to go into order. And in order, I'm going to look at a particular method. I'm going to double click on that method, which takes me to this class and this insert. So at this point, what I can do is I can get in there to the method, and then I want to understand more about this method. I can right click in here and say generate sequence diagram. Now at this point, I can say, all right, I'm only going to go 3 calls deep. It's going to exclude calls to properties and events as well as the system namespace. I'm going to just open it up. Let's see everything. And I say OK. Now we're going to look at this source, and we're going to try to create a UML 2.x sequence diagram. Come on. And that's what this, there you go. So what now this code, or this diagram, as I scroll down, you'll see the alpha blending here. I can scroll in here a little bit so folks in the back can kind of see. But what this is doing is it's actually representing my code in a UML sequence diagram. So your if statements are represented by what they call in UML a combined fragment right here. So you if and you see those expressions, etc. You'll notice here we use these the lost messages in UML to indicate. Remember how I said I'm only going 3 calls deep? Well, you'll bump into those lost message bubbles if the call kept going. Now you can expand them if I can find one here. I don't think that's going to do anything for me. Well, you know what? Let me show you how to do that. Let me do this again just to prove my point. Generate sequence diagram. I'll just go 1 call deep. Say OK. OK. So now it's only going 1 call deep. Oh, come on. Give me a call depth. OK, here. See how I've got a lost message here? I can interactively pull that in. So I can say expand outgoing. Ignore the. All right, hang on. Let me find it. I didn't like that one anyway. Let's do this one. Whoops. Oh, OK. So I can also right-click on any of these messages and continue to generate more sequence diagrams right from this graph, because these messages are clued into the code itself. But if I expand outgoing here, all right. Imagine, if you will, that code would actually expand in place, and you would be able to see that. Okay. Now I can also go from here, and like I said, I can go. You select this, and very much like when you're in an editor, you hit F12. I can hit F12 here, which takes me to that method. Okay. So something to keep in mind on this. Oh, questions? Go ahead.
What kind of trigger or
The question is, what kind of print or export capabilities? So you can print this graph. You've got something else in mind. OK, yeah, you can print this. You can Control-Alt, Control-A, copy, paste into Word, those kinds of things. OK? Any other questions before I move on? Go ahead.
So I have reference to assembly code, but none of my code is referring to it, or if I have cyclic code.
So the question is,
I have two questions.
yeah, there's 2 questions in there. Can you break that down for me again?
The first question is if you have references that are not being used, right? The tool tell me that it's not.
Yes.
The other thing is you have cyclic reference.
OK, so the first question was if I have unreferenced, if I've got code that is essentially dead code, OK, will it tell me about that? And the answer is yes. We will show there's an analyzer on the assembly graph that I can show you. And the second part of that question was if I have cyclic dependencies, will it show me that? And the answer is yes. So we have 2 analyzers. See, I could say yes at least twice today. That was good. So you can right-click on here in Analyzers, and we've got Show Circular References, Show Hubs, which is another way of filtering your graph, which I'm probably not going to have time to show you, and then Show Unreferenced Nodes, which is doing what you're asking. OK? OK. OK, great. So I do running out of time here. I do want to show you some of the UML and extensibility that we've got into the app. So this capability, the Architecture Explorer coupled with the DGML graphs, is all about understanding your existing base. You can point this stuff at any managed assembly if you've got the source or not. If you've got the source, you can do a whole lot more with it. It's more useful. And I haven't even got into showing you about what to do with the legend and how you can group items. Like, for instance, I can take these guys, and I can right-click and say group. Let's say add a parent group. And so that will group that. If I hit F4, I can actually name that group to something new. OK? And at this point, I can also change colors and things like this. OK? Back on the sequence diagram, this is also a snapshot of your code. However, this is designed to be more collaborative, and it's designed to persist. So in this particular case, imagine I've got a snapshot of my code, but I, as an architect or a dev lead, come in here and say, you know what? This isn't how I want it to go. What I want is I want another method. I want a synchronous method going from here to here. And as I add that, you'll notice the color changes. And that's basically to indicate that this is different than your code right now, okay? And that we're calling out what was actually reverse engineered, and now what's actually different because I'm actually designing. I'm doing a what ifs kind of scenario. And at this point, I could right-click and say, hey, I want to create a new work item. And I'm going to create a task, let's say. And a new work item, WIT pops up, and I can put in, hey, Bob, go add this new method call here, and it's in this diagram. Go. All right. Go ahead.
Does this work on pre.NET 4 DLLs?
Yes, that's a great question. Does this work on pre.NET 4 DLLs? And the answer is yes. So it works on 1 up. Yep. Because it turns out that's managed, so we can do that. Go ahead.
Could I just add the code instead of creating a task?
Can you do what?
Just add the code instead of creating a task to add it.
Could you just add the code? Oh, sure. Sure, you could have.
No, I mean, can it do it?
Oh, could it? Oh, so i.e., the question is, can I program from the sequence diagram? No. No. We're not doing that round trip there. Any other questions before I quickly move on? OK. OK, so the idea here is you can any model element. And any model element is a message, could be a lifeline, a diagram itself, you can associate with a work item. This gets really interesting when you get into the UML side of the house, which is, let's say, I want to say new diagram. And I'm going to create, let's say, use case. I can create, so we're shipping 5 UML diagrams in Visual Studio 2010, UML class. UML, oh, I don't have zoom in on this. UML sequence diagram, use case, activity, component, and layer. And I really want to show you layer before we get going. But you can take a UML use case diagram, say OK, and you notice here it's going to put it, I've already got a modeling project. We have a brand new modeling project in 2010 that you can add to your solution, and it can be version controlled right along with the rest of your solution, okay? And you can have many of those modeling projects, although they're not related to each other, okay? So in this case, I'm going to create a UML, a use case diagram. I'm going to say OK. And there I have a UML use case, and I'm going to drop a zombie. I think that looks like a zombie. And I'm, use case, et cetera, and go to town. And right click here, associate these guys, and away I go, okay? And what you see here is in the Model Explorer, you start to see all the elements start to populate here. Now, the interesting thing is the modeling project is the store for all the UML metatypes. But as you add packages, you'll start to see new files. So we start to break your model down in terms of files because it's file-based. Let me show you this. In the Pet Shop models, you'll notice that I've got a model definition, and I've got one file there right now. So I can version control that file. Now, if I come up here to the UML Model Explorer and right-click and say Add a Package, say hello, you'll notice another package file here, package 1720. The idea here is we're breaking your model down into bite-sized chunks to try to minimize your chances of colliding with your fellow engineers as you start to use the models. Go ahead. Great question. The question is, do we anticipate adding state diagrams to this at some point? The answer is yes. We will actually finish all the diagrams in UML in the fullness of time. State and deployment are next on the list. In terms of extensibility, we've actually built the product to enable us to drop those diagrams out of band. And so you can expect to see some of those diagrams before the next Visual Studio release, which is, we spent a lot of time, back at that we were talking about painful cuts. We've actually had to cut a couple features to make sure that the extensibility was there for us to enable some of these out-of-band capabilities.
You say that you can put a task to any element, but how about the whole diagram?
Yes, you can do it to the whole diagram as well. Just right-click in the back of the diagram, same deal. Yep. And associate with this use case, associate with that actor, so you can do all that. Yep.
Can I access the entities behind the models and use them, for example, for code generation?
Yes. So the question is, can I access the entities or the model data and do code generation? And the answer is yes. And in fact, I will be able to. We're going to ship another, talking about out-of-band, we're going to have a code generation power tool that we will have around the time that we RTM, give or take a few weeks, that will actually have some in the background. We're going to use T4 templating, if anybody is familiar with that, to do code generation from the metadata. But that's all open out of Dev 10. You can attribute this with a profile, a UML profile, which is a typical way of doing this, and then go do code generation based on that profile. Okay, quick question?
Can you associate the model with use case description and then eventually back to, say, system or software requirements? And is there any traceability?
So if I understand your question, I can associate this use case with a requirement work item, and is there any traceability between those two at that point? So there is the beginnings of it. So I think what you're asking for is real requirements, traceability, and hey, I modify this, and what's the impact of that, and suspect links, and all the goodness that you would expect in something like a Doors and a Calibre RM, that kind of thing. We're not there yet, but we're starting to go down that path. Okay? Okay, quickly, I want to show you one significant piece of technology that I haven't had a chance to show you yet, which is the layer diagram. Now, let me show you what I mean by this. A layer diagram is a very simple DSL, and what it is how many people have gone into one of your conference rooms, and on the whiteboard is a bunch of boxes, and that's your architecture, right? You've got a box, there's my UI, and I draw a line down there, and there's my business tier, and here's my data tier. That is the layer diagram, okay? What we allow you to do is describe your architecture in kind of like a box form, and then let you map your source assets onto that layer diagram. At that point, we do the same kind of static analysis that you saw me doing when we were creating the assembly graph, right? And we will tell you if the dependencies are being violated in some way or not. Let me show you what I mean by that. So in this case, right, I've got a layer diagram, and what I have up here is my web tier, and I have already previously associated. Let me come up here and say Window, Layer Explorer. And I've got that layer selected, and I've already pre-associated Pet Shop Web namespace with that layer. The way I did that is I went into the Architecture Explorer, Windows Arc Explorer. Remember I said you could show namespaces here? I selected a namespace, and I can drag that out and let it go onto a layer. Now what I'm doing, I'm not going to do it right now, but when I do that, it associates that layer with that particular namespace. So as you add new types, etc., that will participate in the analysis that I'm about to show you. So now what this is saying is, this layer is saying my web tier, my web layer, can and should be dependent on cross-cutting. Notice this link is unidirectional, going from web to cross-cutting. So it's okay for anything in web, so anything in that namespace that I associated with that layer, can depend on cross-cutting, but not the other way around, right? So anything that I've associated with cross-cutting cannot be dependent on anything in web, okay? So this comes back to my main point of, once you understand all your dependencies using all that DGML and assembly graphs that I was showing you, now how do you control those dependencies, okay? And that's what the layer diagram is all about. You can incorporate this layer diagram into your team build by going into you can create a team build, and I can show you that real quick, and say, hey, I want to do layer validation as a part of my build step. But you can also do it right inside the IDE. So in this particular case, I'm going to right-click and say validate architecture. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to make sure that your solution is built. And then I'm going to go do that static analysis to see if any of the code in that one layer is dependent on the code in the other layer. And if there is, it's going to show up as an error. Okay? And once it does, and this will just take a second, once that shows up as an error, then you can decide on what you want to do about that. The idea here is, you need to have a clean architecture, and you want to maintain that clean architecture, and you want to understand, and you want to get visibility into when that gets invalidated. And a lot of times your devs don't really know that, hey, I just took a dependency on this particular method because I wanted to get this thing done quickly, but they didn't realize that thing had this significant chain, this butterfly effect, and it just pulled in, 20 megs worth of dependency, image assemblies, right? So this lets you keep, that's not my computer, this lets you keep that in view. So what happened here is I've got an error, and I didn't put zoom in, I apologize. Basically, this is telling you, hey, you've got an invalid dependency. You've got a dependency between an insert method in BLL, and it's calling card service authorized method, which is in this other layer. And right-click, I can say, go to that. Show me the layers that are invalidated here. And see here, I've basically got a situation where I've got this layer is calling something in here. But that shouldn't be allowed because I don't have a direct access to this. In this particular case, you'll see here it says refactor payment-related code into the payment gateway. So they're leveraging this layer diagram as a way to basically, I want to refactor my code base. And I want to break how we're doing, in this case, a payment provider. This business layer is hard-coded to this credit card processing implementation, and we need to abstract it away so that we control how payments are done. Well, this is a great tool to enable that kind of refactoring, so you can know when you're clean, right? And that's what this allows you to do. Thank you. Question?
Dependency injection, string.net or custom.
Yeah, so dependency injection. So again, it's static, so we're going to miss that. Now, you can get into the analysis pipeline. We have extensibility to get in there and do that, but it's not out of the box.
How do you define the layers? Do you associate layers with
Yeah. The question is, how do I associate the layers? Literally, I can associate items from the layer by clicking right out here and dropping it. Okay? And I can do that from the Arc Explorer as well. Drop namespaces. I can drop class types, what have you. Okay? So folks, let me jump back in here and jump to the end. We've put a lot of effort into the product to manage complexity of your software. We wanted to give you UML graphs so you can start to get your head around your problem domain, which is a significant issue. A lot of folks just understanding their domain is a significant problem. We put a lot of effort into understanding your existing base, which is where we spent a majority of our time today, in looking at all the bells and whistles that you can pull at to understand your existing code base. And we've focused this on the development, on your developers and your architects. We want to make sure that those folks can leverage these tools throughout the ALM, deeply integrate that with TFS work items, et cetera, so you can start to leverage these models through this crazy thing we do, which is build software. Right? That's it. Thanks a lot, folks.